Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me out there? Yeah? Okay. Okay. We have already met in executive session, and we did the salute to the flag in there. So we're going to call the regular session to order. Can we have a roll call, please, Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Byrne?
Here.
Mrs. Swerner?
Here.
Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Salmon?
Here.
Mrs. White?
Here.
Mrs. Richmond?
Here.
Mrs. Korn?
Here.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Here.
Mr. Markarian?
Here.
Mr. Syatt?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Madam President?
Thank you. We're up to the statement of public notice. As you can read in your agenda, there are 2 times for public comment in the meeting. The first one is for agenda items, and the second one is for non-agenda items, or basically anything that you want to talk about. If you do come up for public comment, please sign your name and address on the clipboard and tell us your name and address when you come up to the microphone, please. And it also says in the statement of public notice that the meeting is being recorded. So at this point, we're up to the student representative, RJ Milligan.
Hi, everyone. I want to start off by talking a little bit about our spring break that we have, our one day. And I know school's not going to be very busy at all. I know, like, at least for seniors, there might be like 50% of the kids here. And I know, like, a lot of students are still going away. And at least for seniors, a lot of students who still aren't going to come to school. And teachers are a little frustrated because they have to come and they won't be able to teach at all. But for younger grades, I'm sure that there will definitely be more students coming to school. But yeah, and coming up later this week, we have Mr. Ridge coming up, and definitely all the students are very excited about that. I'm actually one of the contestants in it, and it's always a great event every year. We have like the auditorium filled usually, and for those of you who don't know, it's pretty much like a male beauty pageant almost, and like a talent show where everyone like has an act, and there's a formal wear section, and it's a great event every year and raises a lot of money for student government and all of that. And there's not really much else to report this week.
I know that we've seen videos posted afterwards. Do you think there'll be videos posted in case we can't get there this
Definitely.
year? Okay. Yes, Mrs. Swerner?
Are you able to share with us what your talent portion of the contest will be?
Or is it a surprise?
My talent portion is a dance to Staying Alive.
Oh, like an interpretive kind of?
Yeah.
Excellent. We'll look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, we are up to the board presentation. We are going to go down to the audience for this. This is the MAP data use, which is motivating, what is it? Measuring academic progress? I'm getting confused with the other class. The class is motivating.
From the beginning. So we good? Battery's good. Good. Test, test.
Hi. What's that? Hello. How are you? I'm Kristen Fox. I am normally the social studies supervisor speaking to you about social studies, but I do also oversee this assessment, measures of academic progress. I oversee the implementation of it in terms of how the test is administered, as well as the trainings and the analysis of data that, we kind of all work on together. So Dr. Heineman and I are going to go over all of this with you and share with you what it is and how we are able to use it. I wanted to lay the groundwork first with just a little bit about assessment, so that when you're thinking about when I drill into the details of this assessment and the data and some of the reports that we use, you're thinking about it in the way that we hope you are. Assessment is such a critical part of the learning process. It is used throughout the learning process, not just at the end. It is diagnostic, and that's what this assessment is largely intended for and used for. It is also used to inform instruction and let the teacher know if the students are making progress and ready to go on. That's also assessment. And then it's used at the end, summatively, to determine whether they learned what we wanted them to learn. So it serves many different tools, but at the same time, it is messy. We talk about it a lot, and it is not a magic bullet. There's not going to be one thing that solves everything. And so it's really important for teachers to use their professional judgment when analyzing the results of any of these assessments and applying them and making adjustments as they go. So I think it's really important that you kind of try to keep some of those things in mind as we go forward.
Thank you. So I'll give you some of the background to it. And so when we decided to adopt MAP as our kind of district assessment many years ago, we had some reasons, so I thought we'd share those with you. One of them was, at the time, we were really not a data-rich environment, right? We had data primarily from NJ-ASK, and that was very much lagging data, right? We'd have tests in the spring. At the very waning days of the summer, we would get results in, and it was not very useful. So to us, this was an opportunity to have our own internal assessment that we'd have a quick turnaround on. So that was very important to us. We also knew at the time that we were going to be moving away from NJ-ASK and to PARC. And we knew PARC would be an online assessment. We knew students would have to use computers to take it, and we had no other tool that would give students the opportunity to practice that type of assessment on a computer. So it had that familiarity and that similarity to the upcoming PARC test, which were still in creation when we adopted MAP. Another thing is to give us some data when we did a curriculum writing process in the summer, to sit down with our staff and say, hey, here's what we're seeing, here's what's happening at this grade level, in this content area. What is this saying to us? What does this speak to when we make our adjustments into our curriculum writing? Can we make changes based upon the data that we're seeing on this MAP assessment? And last but not least is that it gave us another tool to make course placements. So there's only a few places that we use it, but it gave us a good source of data to say, is a course placement right for the student or not, and have another data point for that. So what is MAP exactly? What does it look like? So it's a computer-based assessment, which we mentioned, but the big thing about it is that it's adaptive. And that means it changes based on the test taker. So no two students will likely in the same classroom have the same testing experience. So as you get questions correct, it gives you more challenging questions. As you get them incorrect, it will lessen the difficulty of the questions. So it's trying to find the spot at which a student is ready to learn. So ideally, when you talk to the folks at NWEA, the company that created the MAP assessment, ideally students, when they finish, should have about half of the questions correct and about half of the questions incorrect. Right? That's the spot that this algorithm in this test is looking for. It's trying to find that spot where students are ready to learn. It is untimed, so students can spend as much time as they need to complete it. We do know the time, so when students are done, we can see how much time they spent on it, and that's another data point for us. So if we see an interesting change in a student's data, and we say, wow, their score really dropped, and we say, well, last test they took 55 minutes. This test they took 15 minutes. Maybe that's one of the causes why their score might have dropped. So we have the opportunity to look at the time, although the students have as much time as they want to complete it. As Kristen said, it is diagnostic, so it's trying to find out about the student, right? It's diagnosing them, where are they ready to learn in either ELA or mathematics. It's a measure of typical growth. So how the data set is created is they'll take students with similar scores and look at historically how much growth as those students have seen going from one testing window to another. And they'll find that average and say, well, we'll expect student X to grow 6 points from winter to spring, or say spring to spring of the following year. And then they measure whether student exceeded or was less than that typical growth that we see in the student population across the nation. It's also a measure of growth over time. So one of the nice things when we first adopted this, what we really liked was we knew no matter what the state did, and we know since I've been here talking about assessment, we've been through, of course, NJ-ASK, we've been through an initial version, we've been through kind of like a nothing, and then an initial version of PARC, and now a new, smaller version of PARC. And all of those, although the state will say, yes, we know there's similarities and they can do comparisons, we know MAP is a consistent behind-the-scenes piece, and it's always been consistent from year to year. So over the course of the years we've been using it, we can look at student data and pick a student and watch their progress over time. And if something doesn't look right, we could bring that conversation up. Why did a student see a dip? Or, are we seeing really students accelerating at a certain grade level as a positive sign? It lets us see that over time. And most importantly, and I can't state this enough, the most important thing is it's not lagging data. We get results from MAP 2 days after the assessment is complete. So unlike Park even, where we get them a little bit earlier than we did with NJ Ask, you actually can take this test in the winter, which is one of the times we give this test, and soon afterwards, the staff actually have their student results in their hands or can log into their portal and pull up the results of the students right then and there. So what do we assess? Now, there's a couple different MAP assessments that we don't use. The two that we currently use are in grades 2 through 8, the ELA, and there's the grades 2 through 8 Common Core Mathematics. ELA, we start in grade 3. Mathematics, we start at the end of grade 2. And they basically, the testing and the questions, the database of questions comes from basically the Common Core standard. So that's what it's based off of, which of course New Jersey adopted and then kind of tweaked over the past couple years. So those are some of the topics which are just the strands in those two content areas. They do make a science assessment map. We chose not to use that early on. We did pilot it with some of the staff. We played around with it. We didn't see a need to use it. There is a science assessment, and they are coming out, I believe, with a primary grades grammar assessment, right? Or a speaking? What's the new assessment coming from MAP?
Well, there's an oral fluency.
Oral fluency, excuse me. Yep. So that's a new one that they're coming out with. So they're developing new assessments as well. So what is the timeline? We used to traditionally give this assessment as a fall and spring assessment. And when you participate in MAP, you have 3 windows available to you. And the window is just the timeline during which you can give the assessment, right? And they do that so that you have similar blocks of time to compare students in, right? You can't just pick a random time because you wouldn't have a similar space, right, to analyze students over. So we were using a fall to spring assessment. And we talked about doing winter. And when we consulted with the NWA folks, they said, if you're going to do that, you really should be using a winter and spring assessment because the spring data is actually very end of May, beginning of June. That's still very good data to start the year with for your staff members. They can use that data. Then they get fresh data in January prior to actually state assessments to make use of. So we switched to that model, doing a winter and spring administration. The nice thing is on the back end, and Kristen will talk about this with you, is we can do comparisons over time. We could say, I want to see winter of 2016 through, spring of 2018. You can do windows of time to see changes. So it'll let you pick all those different windows when you're looking at the back end of the reporting. It's a web-based assessment, so students can take this in computer labs. They can take it on Chromebooks. It depends on the school and the grade level. So you might hear about students taking it on Chromebooks. You might hear about them taking it in labs. It's really dependent on the school. We do not dictate how they have to do that. It's based upon what the availability is in the building. Like I mentioned before, it's untimed. On average, students take about 50 minutes, right? So it's about a class period at William Annan and about a block of time, a normal standard block of time at the elementary schools. And teachers have access to that data within 48 hours. So that's the most important thing is we get it right back to them and they can log in. Sometimes we give students or staff members hard copies and we meet with them and we go over the data. But sometimes we just let them know that they could access it online, they could log into the portal and pull up all the reports that we'll talk about soon. So, what it measures.
All right, so I'm going to spend a few minutes being a little bit technical and explaining how the assessment works. I mean, Dr. Heineman covered some of that, but I wanted to go into a little bit more specifics because some of the terms are very unfamiliar. So what it produces when the student takes the test is what they call a RIT score, R-I-T, and it doesn't stand for anything important other than the man's name who invented it. It was a man named Rausch interval. So it's a RIT score. The way it does it, as Brian explained, is with this adaptive test. What it is producing is a score on this, I'm pointing the wrong thing, a score on this continuum, right? So the scores range, the bottom is a 0, and the top is something around 300 for both reading and mathematics. These numbers are aligned to the content standards in both math and reading. So they are aligned, to the difficulty level. So when the students are taking the assessment and they get a score, you can see over time how their growth is because this number means the same thing. An analogy that I like to use is inches and feet on a ruler. It has the similar concept to it, in that if I told you that a 20-year-old was 5 feet 10 inches tall, and I compared that to a 10-year-old who was 5 feet 10 inches tall, does it mean the same thing? Are they both 5 foot 10? They're both 5 foot 10. They're both 5 foot 10. It means the same thing. Just like a score of 200 for a third grader on the reading assessment means the same thing as the score of a 200 that an eighth grader might get on the reading assessment, because it is aligned to the same content statements. Now, the difference might be if I am 5'10" and 10 years old, I might be tall for my age, right? So how I'm treated might be a little bit different. And if that score is below the typical score for that grade level, the teacher might need to use the information differently to bring them up to grade level, but it is still aligned to the same information. So it means this has the same meaning in terms of the content and the skills and what the students are ready to learn. Does that make sense? Okay. So as Brian explained, the first time the students take the test, they are given a test that is aligned to their grade level at that time of year, that difficulty level. And you see with the green check, that student got the first question right. So the second question was then at a higher level of difficulty. Got that right. The third question was higher level of difficulty, but they got it wrong, so it got a little bit less difficult. And the test is going to do that for about 50 questions until it calculates the place where the student's getting the questions right half of the time. Because that's where we feel, or that's where MAP feels, they are ready to learn. A technical term for that, if you're familiar with it, is that's their zone of proximal development. So it is identifying the place where they haven't mastered it yet, right? They don't know it solid, but it's not completely unfamiliar to them. They have some of the background, some of the foundational skills, and so they're ready for that content now for the teacher to teach them. Any questions about that? You can ask. So I'd just like to point out a few things that MAP is not, because it can become confused with other assessments that they're taking. And it doesn't measure potential. It doesn't measure what they can do. It's not an intelligence test. And it's not a summative test, so it's not criterion reference. We don't have like a set of standards and it says whether they mastered them or not. It just tells you what they're ready to learn because it is aligned to the content statements that align to that score. Yeah.
Thank you. So how do we make use of this? So the simple way to say it for staff members is this is the perfect tool for differentiation. So you've probably heard that term before, differentiating instruction. This is the best tool that we have in the district to use data to make those decisions. So whether it's a staff member deciding how to group students, and we'll show you a report in a little bit that actually groups the students for the staff member, or it is giving you data where you can differentiate assignments and level assignments for students in your class. All of those things really can be handled by MAP. So, for instance, the middle school, this is a tool that staff use not just in ELA and mathematics, but in social studies and science and all different courses because it really does translate across those subject areas. So staff members use this data and they've been very happy with it. So when we first rolled it out, it took us a while to understand how it worked, but staff members really caught on to how they could leverage the data to make decisions in the classroom. So it's an ongoing training, things we constantly work on, but for staff members, that's really what it's about. Because if you think about it, otherwise, you look around your classroom, you might have activities you do, but it's very hard to get an idea of what do I have to do from day to day with my students as far as the standards go, right? What am I teaching them today? This actually, and we'll show you, it ties into directly to the standards they're ready to learn. So you can look right at what it's saying they're ready for and not have to make guesses as a staff member. So for us as administrators, it is another rich data source. So of course we look at data like park data, but this has been consistent for the past several years. We've been able to look at trends in this data much more easily than we have at park. So this lets us really look at not only, like I said, planning for a curriculum, but also how we need to train teachers. If we see weakness, say, in fourth grade informational text, we see we're struggling there. Why are the students not doing so well in that area? We can look at not only the programming, but we can look at how staff are being trained in that one concept at that grade level. So it is really our most consistent source of data we've had over the past 6 years. So Kristen's going to talk about some of the reports that we make use of and give you some information on kind of what they look like. But The easy thing to say is there's probably more reports than we could even leverage. There is so much data. There's that thing of now sometimes you have so much data you don't have the time to get to all the data that you have, which is, I guess, a good problem. You can kind of pick and choose. But there are many, many reports, and we could really distill them down in a whole bunch of different ways. So we'll give you some highlights. And we've looked at reports that are national normed, and we've looked at reports that are what we call a comparison group. So one of the nice things, and we know what kind of district we are, right? We're a high-achieving academic district. We see that on our park results. We've seen that for, that was something I knew when I walked in the door here, 14 years ago. We have always been very successful at standardized tests, but we like comparing ourselves to other schools that are also academically successful. And at the beginning, MAP wasn't able to do that, but very early on, they were able to pull out similar schools across the nation and use comparison groups and say, well, nationally, here's how you look. But in a comparison group, you look like this. So that gave us even better data from an administrative level to say, okay, how do we compare with really our like peers? So we've had both of those reports. So it's been a nice addition over the past few years to have those virtual comparison groups, or similar schools, as they call it now. Yeah. So the reports.
Okay. I'm just going to talk to you about several of the reports that teachers can access as instructional tools primarily, and try not to bore you with too much data, but it's really just so you can see, like Brian was saying, all the different ways they have to access the information and leverage that in the classroom. So this is the class report. They get a report both for math and reading. There's a summary page, and then the list of scores for the students in their class. I've blocked out their names. So it tells the teacher, there were 19 students who took the test in their class. It gives them like their class average for just those 19. It gives them the district average, the mean score, and it gives them the national norm. So the teacher can orient themselves to what their class is in comparison to the grade level and the national norm, as well as like just within their own class. Now, this is then the students listed from lowest to highest RIT score. That's the RIT score in the middle, so from a 221 to a 263. Have the percentile they are in nationally next to it, so from the 47th to the 99th. They get over here how long the student spent on the test, which is interesting, right? Because you see that the student with the lowest score spent 105 minutes. You also see the student with the highest score spent 123 minutes. So that's something for the teacher to look at. There's not a right or a wrong necessarily, but they have to look at that child and what's right for that child. Was that too long or was that just right? But they can then have some conversations with the student if the score is not like what they think the student should be doing. Then within math, it is broken into 4 instructional areas. So the teachers can look at their RIT score range within each instructional area. So A is operations and algebraic thinking, B is real numbers, C is geometry, and D is statistics. So here they get some information on how they're doing within each instructional area. And you'll notice that some of them are bold. That is an area of relative weakness to the student's overall score. So that might be an area that they need to work on. If you see any in italics right here, that is an area of relative strength for that student's score. So the teacher can use this to identify some strengths and some weaknesses. An even better classroom report, I've blacked out some names, so that's why that looks really weird, is the class breakdown report. So when the teacher pulls up their class, the first thing that they get is this page, right? And so the students here are grouped by RIT range for both math and reading. And what you can see is there are some automatic groups, right, that they could use instructionally. In math, there's a low, medium, high group, and a couple of students who are outliers. And in reading, same low, medium, high, and a couple of low outliers. So those are some immediate groupings they can use within the classroom. Now, go ahead.
So those groups are actually built that way on purpose. So that's what I was talking about. That staff members have a very fast way to say, how can I group my kids for this lesson? They could look right at that and say, this group of students is in that bracket. And if you're teaching, so the message we send when we're doing training is that if you're teaching the kids in the 221 and the 251 brackets the same lesson, someone's not getting a lesson that's appropriate, right? Because they're so far skewed in what they're ready to learn. So that's how that's such a helpful report.
Correct. Now, if the teacher wants to drill in a little bit more, they can click on mathematics. And what's going to come up is kind of drilled in to the kids regrouped by RIT range within each instructional area. So they are now regrouped in each instructional area. So if I'm doing a lesson tomorrow on geometry, I can look at these groupings and see if they're a little bit different based on that instructional area. It shows the student's overall score next to their name within their score in that instructional area. So this is one of the teacher's favorite reports because they can utilize that right away. Now, if this teacher, go back one, clicks on one student's name, now they get to these learning statements, and they go into what we call the learning continuum. So that one student is here, the overall RIT for that student is a 225, and their goal range for expressions and equations is in the 217 to 229 area, range. This is what they're ready to learn. These are the learning statements that are aligned to the Common Core that they are ready for. So if I'm planning my lesson on expressions and equations, I can take a look at this for particular students and see if there's something I might need to do different, a different resource, a different grouping for that day. Now this might look familiar to some of you. This is the report we send home in the summer to all the parents of students who took it, and it shows really a summary of every test event they've had in the district. And we send it home in the summer so you see both test events that occurred and so you can see their growth across the whole year. This is pretty much the same thing, it just looks a little different. It's an interactive report of the individual student's information that the teacher can use. The teacher can use in meetings with parents or counselors to dive into where the student's strengths and weaknesses are. They get a lot of information about how long the student spent on each test, their scores on instructional areas, and then this chart shows their progress over time. And so they can click on each score if they want to drill in for more information, but it can really kind of show you where they've grown or where they've dipped, and you can kind of try to diagnose what's going on. And the last one I'm going to talk to you about is called the Achievement Status and Growth Report. The teachers can pull this up with different configurations comparing different time periods and growth periods, but what we typically do with teachers is have them look back at last year's students at either the end of the school year or the beginning of the next school year. And what it does is it shows their growth over the school year relative to their achievement over that same period of time. So there are 4 quadrants. If you think about, everything above the 50 percentile is above the 50 percentile in terms of achievement, right? Everything below it, below the 50th percentile, is in terms of achievement. But the x-axis, right, the middle, right? X-axis. Okay, it's one on the bottom. So the y-axis is going to show you their growth. I get that backwards, didn't I, Nick? You got it backwards. I got it backwards. Growth is y. Growth is y. Achievement is x. Right, so everything to the right of the middle line is achievement, right? So the kids to the right are above the 50th percentile in terms of achievement. I'm trying to look backwards. And everything below the line in the middle is below the 50th percentile in terms of growth, versus everything above the middle line is above the 50th percentile in terms of growth. So if you look at the quadrants, these students are in the high achievement, high growth quadrant. This would be high achievement, low growth quadrant. Low, high, and low, low. This is fairly typical for what we see. You know, classes will occasionally have some students over here, but the vast majority of our students are on the above 50th percentile in terms of achievement, but we can be split a little bit in terms of our growth, and that is something that we use this data to work on. The teacher can click on these dots and see who the student was from last year, and sort of think about what might have been going on with that student that their growth was below the 50th percentile. They can think about all of these students in the same way and kind of try to analyze and think about what they might want to change for next year. Or they can think about what was going on with these students that worked really well and implement those for some of the other students. Does that make sense? Sorry, I got that backwards. There's some summary information at the end of that report as well that the teachers can use. Is this you? Is this me? So what we do over the course of the year is think about how we can continue to use this information better, how we can train teachers, how we can grow teachers in their understanding of MAP and in their use of it in the classroom. So we are able to use it in grade level meetings, PLC meetings, professional learning community meetings, team meetings at the middle school. We present them at faculty meetings. Like Brian said, sometimes we hand them the reports, but teachers have logins, and when the data is available, we can also tell them it's ready for you to view and they can use it on their own. We run staff college courses every year for newer teachers or teachers who want to take it to the next level. And every year, we're able to send them to some free regional workshops that NWEA runs, which is also great because then they interact with other users in other districts, and they come back with some new ideas that we can all benefit from.
So wrapping it up, what do we see as the benefits of the MAP assessment? So I hope you have realized some benefits as we've given the presentation. We'd like that it's a focus on student growth, so it really gives us an avenue to discuss with staff growth instead of just achievement. We know we're a high-achieving district, but we want to focus on growing our students from day one when they walk in your classroom till the day they leave at the end of the year. It's individualized and adaptive, so students can progress as high as they're able. There's no ceiling to it, right? So students in 6th grade, they could be doing 8th grade content on there if they're able. Feedback's timely, right? So we get leading data, not lagging data. They're getting it as soon as they're taking it, and they can make use of it in the classroom, which is unlike what we've been used to with the state assessments for so many years. It's consistent and reliable. So over the past 6 years, we've had years of data that we've been able to look at and make decisions upon instead of having to be at the whim of external organizations or the state. And it gives students familiarity with computer-based assessment. So we knew that they'd be doing that with Park. We know they're going to have to do that with the new science assessment. So it gave them some, continues to give them some exposure to this type of assessment outside of the high-stakes testing of the state. And it gave us an additional data point in a few different places. So for the G&T program, instructional support, grade 7 algebra, so we've used the MAP assessment to give us some data to help determine placement for students. So that's what we feel are really the benefits of it. We continue to, like I said, I think mainly if you think about growth, that's the most critical thing. It gives us an avenue to discuss that concept with staff and really help them move in that direction. So I will leave this up here as we take questions. This is some of the research behind it. It's a large organization. It's been around for quite a long time. People ask, how big is the data set? It's a tremendously large data set. So it's robust. We know it's been around for a while and it's well vetted. So there are some always weird things when we talk to NWA. We are, as we said, if you plot the student population at Ridge, it is not going to give you a curve, right? It's going to take the norm curve and squish it all the way up to the higher achieving side. And, we always have conversations with the folks at NWA about what does that do to your algorithm, how does that affect our numbers? We know that students who are achieving on the lower end for their grade level have larger predicted growth. Students who achieve very highly have a smaller window of projected growth. And so how does that affect our students when you're working within a smaller window of possible growth, right? Do smaller margins show you higher effect sizes on growth that's being reported? So there's lots of pieces to the puzzle that we continue to talk with them on. They like talking with us, I think, because we challenge them on a lot of these things. And there are many districts like ours that work with NWA. So that's why we've seen things like the Similar Schools Report where they tried to group us together and say, here's how you compare to other schools that are like you. So I'll leave that up there and we'll take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Heineman. Thank you, Mrs. Fox.
Why is the test untimed? And is there any normalization for time? Because that kind of doesn't seem to simulate like a real world.
Well, I think the idea is to find out what they're ready to learn. So if you're going to, that's an artificial constraint on your knowledge, right? If you're just testing recall, how quickly you can access knowing something or not. So I think it's trying to remove that from the equation. So for instance, if I tell you there are 20 questions and student A answers those 20 questions correctly in 10 minutes and student B 20 minutes, why should we say there's a difference between student A and student B? They all were able to successfully answer the question. So I think they're trying to pull time out of the equation as a constraint on the student if they're all going to be able to be successful. So, and a lot of times that's the first accommodation students get, right? Students who struggle, one of the first accommodations you see is additional time on assessments because we know that is a factor for some students. Simply the recall is not quite as quick as other students, although if you gave them time, they're able to be successful. So that's why they took it out. And we do, like I said, we look at it for for instance, if we see that student and you go, wow, they took 120 minutes to do this assessment, we talk to the staff member and say, were they engaged? Were they working? Were they perseverating over a question? What did that 120 minutes look like? Or are they just very slow workers? We see that with students who just really take their time, and some students are just, they blow right through it and they're done in 25. So I think they're just trying to take that out of the equation and just get to the actual knowledge the student has and where they're ready to learn.
So then how does that, like when the teacher generates the reports, like it was just RIT scores that were plotted and kind of like their RIT scores as comparison to other things. So how can the teachers see, except for that kind of first instance like interface where this student is, like when you plot the RIT score, the student is very high achieving, but when you look, when you look back, it took them 2 hours, whereas like a large percentage of the kids finished in 50 minutes.
Right. It actually has an alert. So the interesting thing is they've added an alert. So if a student's time looks off from what's a normal time, so 50 minutes is our norm, if a student had a 120-minute time, it would flag that student as questionable. Yeah, as
Oh.
well, you could step in there.
I think it's because, so you're thinking about it a little bit, I think, a little bit more like a summative assessment that's trying to quantify everything a student knows, but instead it's trying to diagnose what they're ready to learn down to the skill level, so the teacher then knows what the student needs to work on. So there would be other measures that would tell the teacher they need assistance, they need more time. So it's not summing up everything they know and can do, but it's just trying to help the teacher dive into which areas they need help with, right? And then, like he's talking about flagging students for disengagement. So the testing environment on all of these tests are really important. So if the kids rush too fast, or if they daydream, or if they take too long and they perseverate for too long, it affects the reliability of the score, because we don't know if they're really doing their best. There is a standard error and a standard deviation, so that also plays into whether it's a really reliable score or not, that can play into. But the disengagement can also be something that tells us, like, oh, the student took this test in 7 minutes, and then we could ask them if we wanted to retake it, because we're looking for a reliable score. So I think you want to not think about it in terms of measuring them against each other in terms of what they can produce, but what the teacher wants to work with them on to take them to the next level.
All right, and then when you're just mentioning that, and then it says that you compare, how can you compare then to other districts or the nation if it's not a summative test?
It's just not based on time. They're all untimed.
So
It doesn't, time is just not a factor.
So you're just
in the
comparing to
students
what-
showing what they know.
So you're just comparing to what other places know?
Say that again?
So we're just I'm not a big fan of comparing to other districts. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. It just causes agita that doesn't need to be caused, especially in comparing to the nation. But then when it's not summative, it's just showing how kids learn or what they're ready to learn. So if you're comparing kids, or you have like the comparison, so it would be hard, and your parent gets it, like, oh, look at my kid's, RIT test, RIT is, and they're saying, oh, that's how much they know. No, it's not how much they know, it's how much they're ready to learn. Yes, is that what we're saying? So we're comparing our kids to other kids and how much other kids are ready to learn at the same age?
Yes.
Okay.
The same level of instruction for that year. So they're trying to find similar levels of instruction and what the typical student is ready for at that age.
So basically getting a baseline saying that we're teaching these kids this, so our kids are learning this much, they're ready to learn more than other kids. Right.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so that's how you're comparing them. But you couldn't use this test as like the second half of the test couldn't be used, like instead of a park test to show our kids went from here to here and they're doing well. So, look at our MAP scores. We're doing awesome. We're comparing it to everybody. So why couldn't we just use this instead of that? I know the state,
won't let
I
us.
know.
There are
But is it possible to do that?
Sure, I mean, I believe
throwing it
there
out
are
there.
states which let districts, yeah.
I understand the state, but could this show that we're doing our job?
Yeah, so it's not,
That's what I'm asking.
right, it's not inherently designed to look for, like I said, mastery, but if you're saying if a student is ready to learn and they've completed all the standards, then that's really what we're trying to accomplish with the park test, right? So if you say, like, here are the standards, there's a line here where you have to go beyond to be proficient, this assessment could do that. And I think there's a lot of, we went to I guess a year ago, we went to a workshop, and there was a lot of discussion about,
It's
why,
only an hour, so
why can't this be,
that would be much
right,
more
why can't this be a tool that schools
palatable
use?
to
I would agree with you.
me and, of course, lots of other people. So that's it. That's just my question.
Wouldn't mind that.
I want to thank you for your time for putting this together because the map scoring and how we're using it in the district has kind of always been an interest of mine because I just never really quite understood how it's helping individual students in the classroom. And I guess I would ask, am I correct in thinking that if a student is at a certain RIT score in the winter and slips to a lower RIT score by the spring, that that's a problem and an issue of concern?
It could be, right? So remember what I said, this is messy and it's not mathematical. So it is called negative growth, that's what they call it.
Right.
But there could be a lot of explanations for the negative growth. So if that were to happen, that's what you want to do is ask a bunch of questions. Was the student disengaged during the test? Did they just finish? Did they just come back from vacation? And they weren't, you have to kind of go through some problem solving. And then we can also end up looking, if that were to go down the road, at instructionally what's going on. Right? Are we needing to adjust what we're teaching when? So it isn't one answer, but it opens up some doors for us to look at to try to diagnose it instead of finding out like 3 months later when they take the summative assessment.
So if the parents, though, are not getting these reports until June or July, or maybe even August, whatever, till the summer, and they have these concerns about their student, it's already too late to go back to the previous teacher, and I guess you would have to save it for the next teacher for the next grade to ask these questions. I mean, where does a parent go to ask these questions? And then you're losing the whole summer with your student if you have these concerns in certain deficit areas. So I guess that's my biggest concern with this, because the teachers are getting it immediately and supposedly using it immediately in the classroom to help the students, but where does that leave the student?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because I don't think you want to look, you have to be careful looking, as we mentioned, so much into any one piece of data, right? If you don't want to just say, well, they were supposed to have a growth of 6, they only had 1, that's oh my God, that's so bad.
Some have 0, like negative.
Sure,
like gone down,
absolutely.
like
Yeah,
points.
absolutely. And like we said, that's not, can it be something? Yes. First off, we don't see it all too often. And then the first thing you have to ask is, why do we think that happened? So in those cases, if you're getting it over the summer and you see negative growth with the student, I would say the parent should reach out to the school, to myself, to Kristen, and say, here's what I saw in the report, can you give me some insight to it? We'd certainly get back to the parent. Or contact the teacher as well, because that's obviously, if you have concerns early on, we don't send the report till the end, but we have access to the data. So there's nothing wrong with asking a teacher, hey, how's my son or daughter looking in your class? Do you feel like they're progressing okay? They could pull up that data and look. So it is out there, but the report is looking at a window, right? So it's going to wait till the end, and then we send the reports out at the end.
No, I understand. I just think that sometimes the parent has no idea until they get the report that their kid has had that deficit or is struggling. So I just worry about those kids that are in that category and what we do with them to help.
Right. And don't forget, sometimes they could be achieving quite well, and the growth is just,
I agree.
and-
If you look
and-
in the classroom, like, sometimes it doesn't make any sense.
Right, and that's another kind of question altogether that we often have, because we see students, like we mentioned, the test looks for 50-50, right? It's looking to get half the questions right and wrong. We pull up the data, and sometimes we see a student who got 85% of the questions correct. And the math people are like, well, the algorithm's not built to handle that, and so we're not even sure exactly what that means for that particular kid. So especially when you have kids that are being very successful and they're not showing growth, sometimes you have to really delve in. So that's why I would suggest parents call us and ask the question, because we could look more closely at the data, not just the parent report, and say, here's what we've seen, here's the trend, and have a conversation about it.
Thank you.
Talk to teachers about their ability to share information if they feel it's necessary, if there's something that we would be useful to have. It can be used in a parent conference, but it would only be used if it was really useful.
Right. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Much of your, most of the slides I saw student to student. How about class to class, where you have, and teacher to teacher?
Yeah, we can see, as I was mentioning, we could pull up just about any combination of data that you would like. So when we look at on our access, we could look at any, really call up any kind of report we want. So we can look at, you know, every teacher in a grade level, schools across the district, you know, comparisons to other schools nationally. You know, there's almost an infinite amount of data we could pull up on it. So yes, we can do all those things.
You could argue that, gee, we're beating Milburn in 10th grade, but gee, they're killing us in 11th grade.
Well, only if they're using, only schools that are using, other schools using MAP.
Yeah, if they're not using it, you couldn't.
That's
Okay.
If they're not playing the game, we can't compete.
And certainly teacher to teacher.
Yeah, and so, well, right, and so teachers, when we do the reports with the staff, I mean, part of what they do see, I mean, they see how, as we mentioned, class to class. You know, there are teachers who say, especially in the middle school, right, period 4, like, wow, they're way up here, and then period 7, you know, they're 10 RIP points behind on an average. Why is that? You know, there are scheduling things we see, especially at the secondary level. So though sometimes at the elementary level as well, where you see groups of students in certain areas where the whole class will generally have a lower score. And that's important for the staff member to know because they don't always know that, right? I mean, historically, I mean, when I taught, the kids that showed up in your room, you had the foggiest idea what was happening, right? And now teachers are really coming kind of forearmed with data saying, well, I know this class, when they walk in my door, period 4 is going to be 10 RIP points above the other period. Therefore, most of those kids are ready for maybe a little more advanced work, maybe a couple extra questions, whatever it might be. So that's really what it provides. It does let us do that and lets teachers do that, but it also does let them do, like you said, they could say, you and I teach the same thing. When we get our reports, we're both going to see how well your classes grew, how well my classes grew, and have a conversation about that. Because if yours grew better than mine, I should be asking you what happened. What, you know, what were you doing for this lesson? What were you doing for that lesson? How did your class grow more than mine did?
Adjusted for the students in the class.
Correct.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. The first one's easy. Are 100% of our teachers using the data in some form or another to assist their students?
Well, it's grades 2 through 8.
Well, of the 2 through 8.
And it would be primarily, so in 2 through 5, the classroom teachers, they all are using it. In the middle school, you know, there's the language arts, it's reading and math. And when what we do in the other content areas is talk to them at the reading level, so more so in language arts and math, but they are being used at all.
Oh, good. You led into my next.
Not so much the cycles.
Oh,
you know,
that would make sense. So you kind of led into my next question. Obviously, grouping at the elementary level is a big use of the data. The Lexile score would be another big use of the data. What are the top 2 or 3 other uses that our teachers or administrators are using the data to benefit our students?
Using it to adjust lesson plans if they could find students who were not ready for something or were ready to go beyond something. That's what I'm understanding. So they are aligned to content statements that are reflected in the standard and or the curriculum, right? So they can use those to adjust lessons if it shows them that a student is in need of some other reinforcement first.
Yeah, and we use this for our cluster grouping. Don't forget when we talked about cluster grouping, right? How do we organize students to, you saw how big some of the spreads were, right? Where you have essentially students that are in one class spanning 3 different grade levels of content. You know, the RIT scores were so spread. So we talked about, a long time ago, I talked to you about cluster grouping, about using that model to narrow that band so that maybe you only have 2 of those blocks in your classroom, not 4 of those RIT blocks in your classroom. So that's something we do from a scheduling standpoint. And also staff have used it, if you've maybe heard of staff using a flexible grouping model. So sometimes they'll use it for flexible grouping where I say, hey, I have my kids in my math class that are in this RIT range. I'll send them to you, you send me your kids that are in this RIT range, and I could teach a different lesson. So a lot of the flexible grouping, too, was built around using RIT scores to try to get the kids to get the right lesson. That's really the critical piece of it, right, is that if you teach, I would say if you teach one lesson, if you see that spread, if you're teaching a lesson, some of those kids will grow. Some of them already know what you're telling them and will not grow, and some it's going to go right over the head and they won't grow. So when we looked at, from a district level, when we looked at MAP data, we saw our biggest struggles, and I'm not sure if I talked about this way back when we talked about math and G&T. Our biggest struggles were with our highest performing students, the top of the scale, and the lowest performing students. The kids in the middle were growing off the charts. So you saw this really weird plotted curve where the kids in the 50th percentile, their growth was like way up here, and then it drifted, and then it just kind of disappeared in the 10th, 10th to 20th percentile at the top and bottom. So, those are things that we did see, is how do you grow those kids? Because if you're always teaching that kind of lesson, that's for that grade level, you're going to sometimes miss those kids, right? They're going to go maybe a couple days where they go, oh yeah, this is kind of easy and I'm just going through it, and you're not going to see the growth you want. So that's the message to the staff is, hey, you have to see those kids in those high groups, and don't be afraid when we use things like when we purchase exemplars, if you maybe remember years ago talking about getting the exemplars resource and saying it's got above grade level content. So if you're doing a lesson on fractions and this kid's ready for something more challenging, you can get your exemplars book out and you give them the more challenging version of it so that they can push themselves a little bit more. So that's kind of how it is. It is, the challenge for us really is the volume of data. It's time limitations and a massive data, and how do you have the time to really sit down and plan with it? In a perfect world, you'd have all day to sit down and customize every single nitty gritty of the lesson, and that's just not reality. We all know that in any job or career. So we work with staff to really try to get the biggest impact pieces, which are the grouping pieces of it, to get the right students together so the lesson can be focused, and then the planning pieces for resources so that they're targeting with the correct resource.
Thank you.
I just want to piggyback off of something that Karen asked about. So if they take it, I know last year they did the test actually 3 times, and it seemed like a very long time to wait to the summer to get the report on 3 different test times of the kids. So I was glad to see that it's only twice a year this year. But since the scores, the reports are so immediate, why couldn't those reports be generated twice a year for parents so that they do have that information? Because I know during the elementary conferences, teachers are very good about sharing that information. But at the middle school, it's crickets, because you don't go in for conferences. So to get that in July or whenever, and you look at it and you might see something that's alarming, you've missed a window where you as a parent may intervene. You may ask more questions. You may look into supplementing, working with your child, using the summer to get them help. So I just wonder, it would still, I get that you're comparing the winter and the spring scores in that report this year, but if you get the winter scores, you still would have the previous springs to see. I just wonder why that can't be made available to parents.
Sure,
too.
yeah. I mean, you'll always have the prior test to look at. First of all, the real problem is obviously there's, I don't know how many students in combined grades, and 2 through 8. That's a lot of reports that someone's got to generate and then send out. So it's not, unfortunately, it's not you just push a button and off they go to parents. There's a lot of back-end work, and that's something that Kristen deals with. So there's a lot of time that goes into generating the reports for all the students and make sure they're sent out to everyone. So there's a time piece of it. The other piece of it is there's a danger in sending out that winter data and not, if I say, oh, well, you took a test last May, here's your score, and I have winter, what exactly am I looking for? If your growth is only 1, should I be contacting the teacher? You know what I mean? It might put out information that's going to cause more harm than good. If a teacher feels like kids are growing well, I think he's doing really well in class, the growth looked a little low, but okay, I mean, they really were, I don't think they were zoned in on that assessment as they could have been. They probably were a little bit off that day. I'm not worried about it. To send something home and then the parents, get alarmed that, oh my goodness, something's up, that would be my worry. So could we do it? I mean, it's not impossible. It's just a matter of timing, having those reports generated and sent out. So it's not impossible.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
We're trying to find the right balance, right, between spending too much time testing, which is why, so you mentioned sometimes kids might take it 3 times. There are 3 test windows. As a district, we only do 2 formally that everyone does. But an individual teacher has the ability, if they want to test their child in that third session for a reason, they can do that. So that's why some grade levels might have done that in the past.
Yeah, and another thing I should have brought up is, this is actually a tool, another great thing about MAP is we give MAP to any student who enters our district in grades 3 through 8. So when they come to us, if they show up in November from another school district, the guidance team will administer the MAP assessment to them to try to give us a sense of where they're at, right, in ELA and mathematics, the two, core subjects. So it's a great tool that we can just give that. Now, it won't give you the comparisons because it's not in a window, but it will give you a RIT score. So it's a great tool for that as well, so.
And so sending the reports is the same thing. We want to send useful information and meaningful information. So multiple times a year might be misleading for certain students, and so our position has been to just have teachers share it when it was going to be helpful for that student. And parents can always ask. I get calls, and I will share the score with the guidance counselor in the building.
Thank you for all this great information. I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit upon what you said a minute ago about using the RIT scores for class groupings, and that you would have 2 groups with 2 different 10-point ranges, but not more than that?
Yeah, so basically, the recommendation from NWEA is that you should, around 14 points, so around a 14 point, so if I'm at a 200 and you're at a 220, we're really ready to learn different things. So teachers should be looking around for about a 14-point window in their RIT to group students together. So that's kind of the guidance we got from NWEA, is that when you're looking at grouping, you should be trying to separate your students into groups about that range, right? So that's kind of what you're looking to do.
Just for clarity's sake, because I clearly probably misunderstood it, you weren't saying that in any one classroom you're taking the RIT scores and saying this group of 14 and 14 and no more above or below that go in one third grade class?
No. It's that if I'm, no.
Just wanted
It's
to
just that
make
if you're
sure.
teaching a lesson, we're telling staff to look at, if you're teaching a lesson and you see that there are students and they're 18 RIT points away from each other, and if you're teaching the same thing, someone's not growing that day. That's
And
kind
by
of
the way,
it.
depending on the lesson, like a teacher might put kids in low, medium, high groups, because they might learn better that way. But teachers might also create groups that contain within the group a low, medium, and a high. So they really have to think about what they're teaching, what's the best way to teach it, and this is the information that they can more easily kind of make some of those decisions.
My one question was sort of already asked, I think, twice, but I just want to rephrase it one more time. So in terms of like flagging students who may have a drop in or negative growth, if it's a one-time thing, it should just be a glitch, and that makes sense. But is there a way to that a student would be flagged? I know in the elementary school, they're all in one building and stuff, but if a kid had negative growth in 5th grade and then in 6th grade, would they get flagged at some point over time, you think, when they're switching schools, or at Annan when they're switching grades? If a parent didn't know what they were looking at when the thing came home and didn't see it, would the school at some point, flag a kid if it was going on for too long?
I mean, I think so, but there's multiple measures being looked at too. So yes, it's certainly possible that one thing could be such a flag that we would take that. But I think then they would look at more data first. Right. There might be more to the story than that one score
Yeah,
tells.
we have to continuously disengage with the assessment,
Right.
or just seem to never assess well. And yet the work they're producing is excellent. The teacher has to weigh that. We don't want to have any one overriding piece of data where we say,
No, I totally get that. It's just
Yeah.
one piece of the picture,
Absolutely,
but
right.
This is
would there
all-
be a
what
way
all the
that it would be
trainings are about,
flagged?
too,
Yeah.
Right, talking to them about what to notice and what to do with it.
yeah, and we do this with the principals as well. So part of what Kristen does is when these reports come out, when we have our meetings, she works with the principals, we talk about it, everyone looks at their data. So part of it is trying to find those things and see if something jumps out and you go, well, here's a child who we're seeing continual low growth. What's either low or negative growth? Why is that? It is very, very rare. I mean, it's usually almost always a blip. And sometimes it's geez, why did they at the last one in 8th grade? They always don't seem to there's some things where you go, well, I could have bet on that one. It's the end of 8th grade, and they're like, well, I'm not going to really work as hard on this assessment, so the growth is not quite as good. But generally, when we see the blips, that's exactly what they are. They come right back the next time.
Okay, my other question was about, I know we've looked in the past when we were looking at data, at cohorts. Is there a way to do that with this kind of data, or not so much? like if you were is there a way to see if a particular cohort had lower growth, as opposed to looking cross-school or cross-teacher? I was just curious, because I know we used to look at it with other data.
Yeah, you can, like I said, you could really pull apart the data any way you want. So if we wanted to follow a cohort across, you could do that as well. It's to be honest, it's really just a matter of time. You know, the system's very robust. One of the reports we showed you is their next gen set of reporting. They're really great, but a lot of it is just how much time do you have to delve into and what are the questions you're trying to ask. You know, that's because sometimes, you know, you get lost in the data. You could find yourself, you know, clicking and clicking, and 4 hours go by, you go, oh my goodness, you know, and you're not even sure what you're clicking for. You're just kind of, you know, grazing over the data instead of trying to solve a problem or asking a question of it. So I think what we try to really focus on is really the teacher aspects, how we're gonna get stuff into the teacher's hands that's useful, and then the stuff, you know, for our administrative standpoint of what programmatically looks like might be a gap or a weakness or something we're seeing at a certain grade level. So that's what we focused on, but there's a lot more we can do. Yeah.
My other question was, isn't there a way to just let parents like log in and look at it instead of having to like
Not
print out
through
these things and
NWPA.
send them? No? Interesting.
No, they don't have a
Kinda weird.
parent portal.
Yeah, I just had a question. So on this class report for the teacher, I've noticed like there are some students that have like fairly low scores, but on the other hand, they also kind of took like less than 40 minutes on the assessment. So would a teacher like do something in that case? Would they look more closely?
So there is also standard error. It's got a range around, so the RIT score at the top is 221. And
Yeah.
around that RIT score is the standard error. So
Yeah.
what that means is that if the student were to take the test again within a short period of time, their score would fall in that range statistically.
Okay.
Right? So it could be a little bit lower, it could be a little bit higher.
Uh-huh.
The larger that standard error is, right, the less reliable the score
The
is
score
for a
is.
lot of
Okay.
statistical reasons as the way it's calculated, and that can be related to things like their engagement with the test, right? But it's hard to measure, but they
Yeah.
did introduce this new tool this year of, they alert the teacher if a student is disengaged.
Oh, okay.
So if they are answering the question so fast that they're not even reading it.
They're not even reading it, yeah.
It flashes orange on the proctor screen, and the teacher can go prompt the student to,
Yeah, the teacher screen basically shows the
Orange.
students testing.
Okay.
So when the teacher's logged in, they're seeing their class
Right.
assessed.
Yeah.
So if you start staring around, it'll give me a little, you know, and I can go over and say,
But-
hey, get back on.
but for some students, 40 minutes might be fine. It might have found their zone of proximal development in that time. So it is not a
okay.
tell-all,
Don't
an
forget, there might be
instant
fewer
tell-all.
questions.
Yeah.
You might get 5 fewer questions than another student because it got to that 50-50
Got it.
faster.
So that's why it's not
Yeah.
an answer, but it is a place to start asking some questions.
Okay.
Like, was that long enough? You know, what do I
Right.
know about this student when they take other tests?
Yeah, there's just like, there seems to be a fairly large spread of time. How long, you know, I know the average is 15 minutes, but there's
What
a
I
big
find most
spread.
interesting about it is, if you think, when you look at that data, right, you start realizing we generally test kids in a, 45-minute
I
window,
know.
right? And that's what we give them the test. So it does make you realize that if you made every assessment that there is unlimited time, right, that you might see some performance differences in students that are more telling of their actual ability, that this is letting us find. Because that's what this is trying to find, right? We want to see where we're ready to teach them. We're not trying to constrain it. So not that we could have that ability, we'd be in school all day. And I think we have limitations on that, Mr. Markarian, so we can't do that. And I think the students back there don't want to stay in school any longer than 45. That's about it. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Any other board members have questions?
We'll take questions from the public when we get to public comment.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're now up to the superintendent's report. We have one item. Would someone like to make a motion to move that item? Mrs. Wooldridge and Mrs. Gray, second. So any board members have any questions about item 1? Do we vote on that? Do you have anything else? Okay. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Swerner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes?
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. We're up to approval of minutes. We have one item. Oh, public comment, I'm sorry. Okay, we're up to public comment on agenda items. If anyone has any questions or comments on anything that's on the agenda, including the presentation that we just had, this would be the time. When you come up, please put your name and address on the clipboard and tell us your name and address when you come up to the microphone, please.
Good evening. I just want to say thanks so much for having that very informative presentation. It had a lot of good data points in it, things that were new to me and some things that were repetitive but worth hearing again. What I wanted to ask is, does the curriculum committee here actually take those scores and study them and then decide what sort of programs we need in the school district, whether it's for the 2nd through 8th grade, let's say, like for example, gifted and talented, do you decide, okay, we're going to expand gifted and talented based on some of these MAP scores, and you see there's a cluster of children and students who are performing at a very high level, and you see a differential of more than, let's say, 14 points in classrooms and whatnot, do you then look at this data and decide to have separate programs that address those children's needs? That's one question. Number 2, at the last meeting, I was very excited to hear about the curriculum committee discussing the possibility of having an accelerated math program for 5th graders, if I'm not mistaken. And I wanted to know if this type of information is used in selecting that. And that's it. That's it for now.
Is there anyone else for public comment on agenda items? No, okay. Now at this time, we're up to the superintendent's, up to approval of minutes. Do you want to answer that now? Or okay, you want to answer the question about the MAP testing first?
On the MAP testing, Brian, and then we'll go on to the rest.
So I'm not sure about this. The second point you had was about what grade? So we're talking about 5th grade? Maybe, I think you might mean 6th. So, right, yep, absolutely. So, yep, so the first year of those students are in 5th grade this year, right? So that program that started 3 years ago, that cohort is in 5th grade and they'll be moving into 6th grade. So there is an accelerated Math 6 course, which is what the BOECC reported out on at the last meeting. So that is indeed happening. We are not necessarily using MAP scores, directly for that group of students, because most of those students are moving in from the gifted program. So MAP scores were used. That's part of the rubric for the G&T program. That is available on my website. You can see all those, the different cutoffs. So we don't necessarily have, you're mentioning if students have a differential of 14 points. We see that literally across the board, right? So we don't just create new programs for every 14-point group. We believe in differentiation and using that strategy for our staff members. So the model is not to say, if we see a group that's 14 points ahead of another, because we would literally be having special programs everywhere. So what we work on is instructing staff on and giving staff tools in working with students that are achieving at a higher level or moving at a higher level. So the reason behind the math program when we very first started G&T Math was, part of it was from the MAP data and seeing that our students in mathematics had a lot of very high achievement, but had some struggling growth, and we wanted to provide for them more math instruction at a faster rate. So that was kind of where the outgrowth of the current math G&T program. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Hyman.
Okay. Didn't we already do that, though? Do it at board forum. Okay, so we're up to approval of minutes. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Swerner? Would someone like to second? Mrs. Woldridge? Any comments or questions about the minutes? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne,
Abstain?
Mrs. Werner,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Woldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Madam President.
Okay, we're up to the Finance Committee report. The Finance Committee has not met since our last report. We're meeting next week. There are 2 items under Finance. Would someone like to make a motion to move those 2 items? Mrs. Woldridge and Mrs. Gray. Does anyone have any questions about these 2 items?
Is there 3?
Sure.
Hi.
There's 3. There's 3 items? Oh, wait. Oh, down here, okay, I'm losing it. Okay, so 3 items, sorry. Let's
So
redo the
for the-
motion.
There you go.
Just
Make a motion for 3 items.
okay.
Yeah, okay, Mrs. Gray and Mrs. Woldridge, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Just for the second one on the travel, so is this different from what we've approved for past years?
No.
Okay, so it's just for next year we're approving it, okay.
Any other questions? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne,
I'm going to abstain.
Mrs. Werner,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Woldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes,
Madam President.
thank you. Okay, we're up to the Personnel Committee report, and there are also 9 items under Personnel. So do you want to do the motion first or the report first?
Well, we haven't met since we last reported. Personnel is meeting off-cycle at 8 a.m. this Thursday. And I'd like to make a motion for 9 items.
Okay, would someone like to second? Mrs. White? Okay.
Any questions? Yes?
I have a comment. Item number 2, Jillian Shadis, we're going to miss her. So that's my comment.
I'll second that comment.
3rd, 4th, 5th.
3 through 9, 10, 11, 12. Everyone's right. 3rd, 4th,
Okay.
5th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let the record reflect everyone on the stage has
Yes.
seconded Mr.
Seconded
Burns'
the motion,
sentiment.
okay.
All right, any other questions about any other items? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Byrne,
Yes?
Mrs. Werner,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Woldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Madam President.
We're up to the Policy Committee report.
Well, we met today, but I'm going to do the report from last time. And it was we met on March 12th, but I didn't get to report on it last time. So we talked about the bring your own device policy, which is policy number 2361. And it's the acceptable use of computer networks and computers and resources. Because there's nothing specific about smartphones use in the policy. So a paragraph had to be inserted regarding whether students can use their phones and when they can keep them on their person. So when whether they can use them in the classroom we were asking, should they have to stow any personal device during class? Like if they have a laptop, you have a tablet, you have smartphones, a smartwatch in addition to the phones. So it was decided that the policy should extend to all technology unless the teacher specifies something different. So if the teacher wanted them to use it, that's a different story, but if not, all devices should be put away. The students would still, the student handbook already specifies that technology must be off and away, so the students would still be able to use the phones in common areas and study halls, but we have to tighten up wording on use of phones outside the learning environment. There also have to be, I guess we have to have some kind of storage, like a fotel, as they call them, where they hang their phones. In all the classrooms, there's something similar to hold a device, something where they can put them. And the new wording will include all personal devices. So, and you're saying Nick was going to draft up a paragraph in line with like Ridge, grades 9 to 12, that personal devices be put away in class unless the teacher specifies otherwise. In WAMs, grades 6 to 8, that the personal devices are always in the locker, which is no different really than how it is now. And in the elementary schools, the personal devices we kept in backpacks not to be used at all, which is the same. Nothing has changed there. And so hopefully the draft will be ready for the our first reading for the next meeting.
Next meeting.
Right, for April 26th, whatever it is. Is that right?
23rd.
23rd, so that should be ready for that. And the other thing was, we did the second reading for all the other
We already did that last
stuff.
time.
We did it last time. So, and then we met today, so I'll report on those next time as well. All right.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Korn? No? Okay. We are up to Curriculum Committee.
And Curriculum Committee is meeting on Friday.
Thank you. Now we're up to the Advocacy Committee.
The Advocacy Committee has been snowed out for the last 2 months, unfortunately. So we're looking forward to May, hoping that we'll be able to meet.
Okay, we're up to Liaison Committee reports. Mrs. Waldridge.
Okay, so I have a liaison report for the Municipal Alliance. We met on April 3rd. And Roseanne Cervelli from the Central Jersey Family Health Consortium gave a comprehensive presentation about vaping, which is a big topic lately in the media and everywhere. So she provided general information about vaping devices, and she also provided detailed information about the Juul, which has become very popular with college students, high school students, and middle school students, basically all over the country since it was released in 2015. She spoke also briefly about vaping marijuana and vaping alcohol. Vaping alcohol is very dangerous because the vaped alcohol travels directly to the brain and the bloodstream, and intoxication can happen very quickly. In addition, vaping alcohol bypasses the stomach, which eliminates one of the main ways the body can prevent alcohol poisoning. And I mean, the people at the meeting were pretty shocked that people would actually try this, but apparently sometimes they do. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was this coming Wednesday, April 11th, the Ridge Against Alcohol and Drugs students will present Teen Talk at 7:00 p.m. in the Ridge High School cafeteria. This event is for parents and will feature informal discussions among RAD students and parents about vaping, social media, depression and anxiety, academic stress, and underage drinking. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you. We're up to the SEL Committee.
Continuing the theme from advocacy, we were snowed out, and so we will be meeting on the 30th.
Thank you. Okay, now we are up to public comment on non-agenda items. If you come up, please write your name and address on the clipboard, and remember to tell us your name and address when you come up to the microphone.
It's a guess.
Hello. My name is Drew DeLaw. I am a junior at Ridge, and I live at 138 Highland Avenue. I'd like to start by thanking you for listening to our concern regarding the lack of holiday for Diwali in the school. When I was growing up, my family did not usually go to the temple. Most of the rites that we did were at home. We said prayers on the car ride to the bus stop, and that was about the maximum that we did for our religion. When I was young, Diwalis were special because that was one of the few times that we'd go to the temple where you'd be able to spend time with our families and friends, and we would be able to light firecrackers to celebrate. As I got older, I had less and less time to actually be with my family and to practice my religion. I was a good student, and I was always hated missing days off from school. I missed one day of chemistry where we learned significant figures, and then the tests, following tests, I started losing many significant points on those, on the specific topic. When my dad asked if I would take my day off for Diwali, I had to decline. No way to do it because there's too much homework and too much classwork to do. I would be swamped with work regardless of whether I go to school or not, since I had to make up the work I missed. That night, while the rest of my family was doing necessary rites for Diwali, I was in the corner of my room, hunched over my computer, desperately studying and completing my homework and losing my religion, literally. Diwali, the Festival of Lights, is an important day for our religion, Hinduism. It is a very unique part of our cultural and religious identity. America is best at mixing pot. It can only be so if we encourage tolerance. We need to create a holiday for Diwali in our school district, and we need to close schools on that specific day. By creating a local holiday, we can assert ourselves on the right side of history, and we can encourage interfaith dialogue. We are only asking for one day in the school year. I'm certain that it would be easy to integrate into the schedule for the next 3 years. We have already integrated Rosh Hashanah and Good Friday, and similarly important holiday in Judaism and in Christianity. Soon we will be adding MLK Day into our schedule. It is simple to add another day into the school year without majorly grave consequences. We already are doing so for snow days. Basking Ridge, like all of America, has had a fraught history when it comes to treating people equally. It doesn't need to be that way. Integrating Diwali into our school schedule is a way on the path forward for equality. We do not need to be closed-minded. We must search for equality. To end on a quote from one of the greatest leaders from our nation, "The government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." Let us create a holiday for Diwali, and let us fulfill Abraham Lincoln's dream of equality and responsive governance.
Hi, my name is Roshni Tundon from 178 Smoke Rise Road, and I'm here to advocate for Diwali as a holiday for the 2018 to 2019 school year and onwards. Diwali, known to most, is the Indian festival of lights, but in reality it is much more. For Indians, the importance of Diwali is like Christmas and New Year's combined. This holiday brings friends and family together as we exchange food and prayers. As the populations of Indians in this community continues to grow, Diwali is being celebrated more and more. To not have this special day as a holiday accepted by the district, we feel excluded. It's a matter of equality, and we're not receiving it. To add on, Diwali isn't the only holiday we celebrate. The weeks that surround this festival is holiday season for us, and we spend most days in that time celebrating as well. This puts tremendous strains on us as we get older, as it is hard to balance school and activities along with your culture. Having one day off in the middle of this chaotic period is also giving us a rest, because on the most important day of the year, we should not be stressed about projects and homework. We should be celebrating with our family. 2 years ago, when Diwali fell on a school day, I skipped school to participate in celebrations with my family. Last Diwali, I did go to school, along with most of my friends, who were too scared and stressed to miss even one day of school. I didn't want to miss any important tests or harder classes. I also knew that missing a day of my personal holiday would make me miss an important practice for my track. My teammates would get a good run before me, but I would have to miss it. If Diwali was made a holiday, I wouldn't be missing out on an opportunity my teammates would get. I then came home later that day and immediately started helping my family with preparations to pray and spend time with our loved ones. After a hectic but enjoyable rest of the day, I was exhausted and wanted to go to bed. It was 12 o'clock. I wish I could say I slept right after that. Instead, what had been lingering over my head the entire day was about to start. I still had to do my homework. I barely got any sleep that night. It bothers me on the one day of the year that's most important to me, I had to be thinking about outside pressures like school. This marks the 6th year the Indian community has petitioned for this holiday. Please don't let another year go wasted. Please tell me one good reason why we shouldn't have Diwali as a holiday. You claim that deadlines for next year's schedule update has passed, but if you can push it back 2 months for Martin Luther King Day, why not one for us? Indians are no longer a minority in this community, so why are we being treated like one? We're not asking for a favor, because to us this is more of a right. Thank you for listening. I hope you consider our request.
Hi, good evening. My name's Manav Varney from 5 Ross Lane. I'm a junior at Ridge High School, and I just wanted to start off by thanking the board for giving me this opportunity to speak today. I came here today not because my parents told me to come, not because I'm pressured by my peers, but because I'm proud of who I am. I came here today to talk to you about Diwali, the Hindu religious holiday celebrating the festival of lights and good over evil. I've always helped my parents, ever since I was a little boy, I've always missed school on the day of Diwali. I've always helped my parents light the diyas on our patio, eaten my grandma's heavenly sweets, and gone to the temple to perform puja with my family and friends. For many years, I proudly wore the kurta, the traditional Indian clothing, around my shoulders, and the kumkum, the ceremonial powder on my forehead, not worrying about my homework or tests. But for the past few years, I haven't been able to participate in all of the activities that make me who I am today. The further I advanced into middle school and then high school, the harder it was to take the day off to celebrate this religious festival. Because of the school rules, I could not go back after school to my mandatory forensics practice. Instead of going to the temple with my family, I would be stuck at home studying for my chemistry test on the next day. The work simply never stopped piling up, and eventually I would have to make all of the tests up the next week, when we would have already started learning the next chapter in our textbooks. It got harder and harder to connect with my religion like I had done for all of my childhood. Over time, the kurta on my shoulders got replaced with a backpack. A textbook was in my hand where a diya once was, and the kumkum on my head was slowly fading. I was gradually forgetting who I was, lost in all of the homework and tests that burdened me. Eventually, I finally assimilated to high school's pressures and was going to school on the day that I looked forward to for the entire year. Being a religious high school student in today's day and age, I think that this is the worst thing that could happen to a young child. The religion that I learned all throughout my childhood was slipping away from me, and I realized that I wouldn't be able to pass it down to my children one day. For the sake of myself, my fellow friends and family members in this room, and for the entire Hindu community of Basking Ridge, I urge you to make Diwali a district-wide religious holiday. I don't need to go on and on about the demographics of our community. That's simply already been done. The fact is that we are one of the largest demographics of Basking Ridge, and denying us our religious holiday would simply be unjust. I think that granting a religious holiday to all faiths should come naturally, but in our case, it hasn't yet. There are many different religious faiths that make up Basking Ridge diversity, and suppressing the expression of this diversity would simply limit our town of reaching its full potential. While we respect the many different religions of our community, all we ask of you is to do so as well. According to World Atlas, Hinduism is the third largest religion in the world, with a total of 1.6 billion followers. We're not asking you to follow the billions of religious holidays that we have, only to give us this one day. One day for us to recognize and embrace our culture and religion. One day for us to truly remember who we are. One day for us to learn and what our parents brought to this country many years ago, making it the diverse nation that it is today. We wouldn't be the first ones to do it as well. Millburn, Glenrock, and many other districts already embrace the Hindu culture into their community by making Diwali a religious holiday. It's about time that we, the community of Basking Ridge, join the trend. In this ever-changing world, we need to change our ways as well. I regret that I didn't speak to you 6 years ago about the same topic, and I often wonder if we would have gotten to celebrate our holiday all these years if I did. If only I could go back and tell myself to speak in what I believed in, then I could have spent the last few Diwalis at my house with my family. But the reality is I was forced to lose a little bit of who I was every November for the past 2 years. And I hope that my brother, an incoming freshman next year, as well as all the other students of Basking Ridge, will not have to go through the same thing. So, all I'm asking you to do is very simple. Just grant us Diwali as a district-wide religious holiday. Now, if there's anything I've learned throughout my time at Ridge High School, it's that even the smallest stones make the largest ripples. And trust me, my friends, and the rest of the Hindu community of Basking Ridge are trying to make tidal waves. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Keyshawn. I'm a junior at Ridge High School, and my address is 14 Raritan Place. Before I start anywhere, first of all, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, and everyone else the opportunity, to express our opinions and use our voices. However, I'm here with a simple request. September 21st, a Thursday, Rosh Hashanah. March 30th, a Friday, simply enough, Good Friday. But perhaps most significant, March 15th, a Monday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's ironic that the year our district finally chooses to recognize a hero, steadfast in his beliefs of equal opportunity in the face of discrimination. When my community is asked for one day off of school, nothing has changed. If you haven't guessed it, I'm here to talk about Diwali. However, before I start talking about why I feel like we need to have Diwali, I want to talk about what this defining holiday means to the Indian community, my community. Diwali, or Deepavali as it's known in some areas, directly translates to a row or series of lights. A festival dating back thousands of years, variations of the stories that inspired the holiday aside, this festival is instrumental in my culture. An official holiday in Fiji, Guyana, India, Malaysia, Myanmar, Nepal, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Trinidad and Tobago, just to name a few, Diwali represents victory. It's the victory of light over darkness, good over evil, knowledge over ignorance, and hope over despair. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Aptly put by Martin Luther King Jr. in his work, A Testament of Hope. Our district has chosen to recognize someone who spoke volumes for those who are not heard. But if we as a community are so willing to recognize those who challenge the status quo, who challenge the norm, who challenge the way things are, and most importantly, those who challenge inequality, then why do we allow it to happen? For Christian Americans, we stay home. For Jewish Americans, we stay home. But for Indian Americans like myself, we can't. Fact, Asian Americans represent the largest minority group in this district at 24%. As a member of the largest minority group in this town, I never felt like I'd be living like a paradox, one in which my town acknowledges the fact that I exist, but ignores me just the same when I ask for change. India has 21, the most public holidays in the world. However, when I come up here and speak, I'm not asking for 21 days off from school. Frankly, with the amount of snow days we've had this year, I don't have to. I'm asking for one. But preempting the response of, well, we can just take off from school to observe, two unfortunate dilemmas result. I'm currently enrolled in 5 AP classes. However, in the district that we live in, this is nothing more than a norm. If I miss school, work is still assigned, and the work that I missed is work that I have to catch up on. Every year, I'm asked to make a choice. Stay home and face the brunt of work when I get back to school, or go to school and slowly let my cultural tethers unravel. The second dilemma is that while I may take off from school, my peers will not. What does that do for awareness, though? Where were you yesterday? It was Diwali. Oh, so you just skipped school. While this interaction with my friend may have just been good-natured and just for laughs, when this could literally be representative of normal behavior, it's no laughing matter. Because when the holidays that matter to me, such as Diwali, become a joke, my cultural identity becomes a punchline. Look, the world has changed a lot in the past 5 years, and that is undeniable. But if there's one thing that's remained steadfast, it's this board, and that's disheartening. The way I know this is simple. 5 years ago, I stood before this very board, a small 6th grader who didn't yet know the power of his own voice, and I asked this board the very same question. If Diwali would be given to my community as a holiday. 5 years later, and somehow for the first time in my life, I'm at a loss for what to say. At the end of the day, if not for me, if not for everyone else, do this for me. I have one more good year left in this district, and then I'll be gone, and I don't know who'll be there to fight my battles for me. But for a kid born in Morristown, a kid who's grown up in this district his whole life, a kid born with some idealized perspective of what the American dream is supposed to be, so I'm asking this board to do something simple. Please, wake up.
Kruti Kapadia, 23 Raritan Place. Let me just give you a little recap. Last year, can you hear me? Sorry. Okay. It's easier right now. Last year we had 1,100 people who came to Ridge High School to celebrate Navratri. It's a festival that symbolizes the triumph of good over evil. And we have a special dance that we like to perform for that auspicious festival. The reason I need to mention this is because we had a fairly good number of non-Indian Americans kids who came to celebrate it with us for this Indian festival. They had borrowed Indian clothes and wanted to participate and learn about another culture. It was so good to see the young generation embrace, enjoy, and participate in the culture of another religion other than their own. We also had the Democratic and the Republican groups who came to join us in the festivities, dressed in Indian ethnic clothes and were willing to learn some new dance steps. A couple of years ago, Karen Gregg had joined us with her daughter to participate and learn about Diwali. I'm sure some of the reasons that you must have come, Karen, was just out of healthy and positive curiosity, and probably your daughter probably had some Indian friends and she wanted to learn more about that culture. It was absolutely a pleasure and great to see you. in our Diwali festival, Karen. There were also present police and fire department of the town who had also wanted to participate in the festivities. We want to get a day off for Diwali. So not only can we enjoy the religious festivities, but we would absolutely love to invite our non-Indian friends and neighbors to our religious communal gathering. We should be fortunate that we can immerse ourselves in a whole different culture right here in Basking Ridge. Wednesday, November 7th, 2018, is half a day in our school, and that also happens to be the Diwali day for us. By giving up 4 hours of academics and giving us a day off, we can all come together and celebrate Diwali, which is the 3rd largest religious festival in the world. Holidays of all major religions should be honored and one should not be penalized for practicing their religion. I beg the board to recognize and be receptive to agreeing and having Diwali as a holiday in our township. Let diversity unite us rather than divide us. Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else down there for public comment? I can't see.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ruma Malhotra. I have a 3rd grader in Mount Prospect School. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for the commendable work that you all are doing at this Board of Education. My 3rd grader is a gifted and talented student, and thanks to this program, he's getting sufficiently challenged and engaged at school. We are very happy with the program. In the 2nd grade, he got selected in the Redbird curriculum as well, which was, again, a math-related program. The presentation on MAP was very informative today, and my comment is regarding earlier question regarding expanding the use of MAP scores for enriching the GNT program and expanding it beyond just math. Because right now, we have only math, and I feel that the elementary school is the foundation for the kids, so why not expand the GNT program to reading and writing, to science especially, and help kids with the overall development. So I hope you all will consider this and make the GNT program more enriching for the students. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amita. I'm living in 5 Watchung Drive. I have a junior in Ridge, and I have an 8th grader who soon will be coming into Ridge High next year. The MAP presentation was really nice, very informative, but it brought back a lot of good old memories for me too as my children grew through this system. And one thing I'd like to bring is good MAP scores are used towards the GNT program as well as to get into the accelerated math program. Perfectly fine, that's good. There are children who make it to that, they come up. But there is a bucket which today Mr. Bryan mentioned about that. There are children who did not make it to that. They are neither high nor too low, but somehow stuck in the middle. How are we catering to them? Especially the curriculum committee has to think through this. When that group of children come into Ridge, into high school, they go through a lot of trauma, mental trauma, I would say. And also the children who made it to the middle school, into the accelerated math program, and coming into Ridge, the rigor is so high, and all they have to work is only, think through is only about their GPA, because GPA is their gateway to their admissions into college, which I'm seeing now because this is my first child and applying into college now. I'm going through the college requirements and what is needed from GPA point of view, or is it AP they are going to look at, or is it the GPA that matters? And Clearly, it is GPA that matters. It's not AP. Even to get an admission into a college, to get to the door, the GPA matters. If you get that amount of GPA, you're into it. And then they look, next step is how many rigor courses have you taken? How many APs have you taken? That is the second step. So the first step itself, many are failing. I could see that even the accelerated program children who go into high school, they are unable to cope up with it. So what is a fallback the curriculum offers? To my knowledge, from 11th and 12th grade, there is none. For example, if a child goes through a 9th grade honors algebra 2 and a honors pre-calc in the next year in 10th grade, in 11th they are forced to take either AP Calc or AP Stat. Only AP courses are available. So if they take an AP Calc AB, and if they are kind of underperforming and don't want to pursue that further, and in 12th grade, if they want to look for an honor stat, they don't have that option. They are forced to take another AP. They don't have an option even for them to step down and think, I'm not going to be a math major. I don't need to do an AP course. I would love to do an AP art or some other, like environmental science, which is their liking, but they don't have an option for that. So probably I would request the curriculum committee to look into it, to see if you would like to bring in a honors level calc course as well as a honors level statistics course, which the children who are stuck in between, which today Mr. O'Brien mentioned about it, is they have an opportunity to pursue it rather than taking a CP level and breezing it through with an A+, which is fine. It's good for the GPA, I don't disagree, so that a ridge will not be called as a GPA deflator like Boston University or other schools are called, but you need that. GPA does matter, and we don't want the rich students to be, especially the children who are in between, neither too high nor too low, to be left out. So please consider, I request the curriculum committee to do that. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sundri Rao, and I'm from 5 Ross Lane in Basking Ridge. I was here at the last meeting, too. And I did talk about the curriculum, about the AP, and about the teachers' tutoring. I don't want to be, wasting time coming every week, every meeting over here, and taking time away. So I would request I would like to, kind of meet with the curriculum committee, or the curriculum supervisor, because I want to work as a parent with the curriculum committee to see how we can help our children in our school system. I did mention last time that we should put a cap on the APs for our juniors and seniors. And Mr. Marketian, you responded saying children should take what they are capable of taking. Our children who get into AP are capable of taking APs, and that's the reason why they are in AP classes. But it so happens that when the children come into AP classes or honors classes, the first week they are told, if you are here in my class, you're on your own. So they are taught a concept, but they are tested on a different concept. The teachers do take test papers from college level, but I'm not sure if those college level test papers are set for freshmen of college. Maybe those teachers are also accelerating their programs or their tests and setting the test papers for sophomores. So technically, if we look at it, maybe our children who are in junior year and senior years are taking tests that are set for sophomores, which may not be required because the teachers are teaching at a high school level. So either the teachers need to be checked on, and we need to have surprise visits on the teachers to see how much they're teaching in the classroom. Because there are about 2 or 3 teachers who teach the same subject. I would really like to see how many of these tests do children score above 50% or above 75%. How many of the teachers do the curve? Because there are subjects where there are 3 teachers, but not all 3 do the curve. 2 of them do the curve so that the children benefit and they get a better grade. But there's one teacher who says, I will not do it. So how do we fix that? We really want children to enjoy their education. And I really want to work with the curriculum supervisor or the committee to see how we can help our children.
I have a junior and I have an incoming freshman. And I've been meeting up with a lot of counselors, and our counselors in our school system are really helpful. They are doing their best to help the children in this junior year and selecting the course for senior year. But there's only so much that they can do because they have so many children that they're handling. I have been given to understand that yes, our school system offers a lot of APs and children show a lot of rigor, and children do take, I agree there is a percentage of gifted and talented in our school system. And I'm not requesting any of these caps for those children. Maybe they can be put into a GNT program and they can take all APs. But there are certain children who cannot cope with APs, all APs, in their senior years. But they have to show the rigor for the colleges. And the college sees how many APs are being offered, how many the children have taken. So they are under a lot of pressure. And what we can do to get them to release the pressure is by putting a cap for these children, saying, okay, fine, if you do not get an A- or an up, you cannot take more than 2 APs. And when the colleges see that, okay, this is what the school is offering, these children stand a better chance to get into IB colleges. The last time that a student got into Stanford from our school was 8 years ago. This year, there's a child who got into Stanford, and I know that girl personally. And I know she's a very studious student who can study on her own, and she's an all-rounder. I would like for our children to be all-rounders. Our children are getting rejected by IBs because they have very high APs. They have taken all APs, but they're not well-rounded children. If we look at the band, if we look at forensics, if we look at the after-school programs, by the time children come to junior grades, they start dropping out. They don't have time. We want our children to be well-rounded when they apply for colleges. We want them to stand a chance to get into the IB colleges or the best of the colleges because they are putting in so much of an effort. The parents are... You have about 1 minute to go. Thank you. And the parents are giving 65% of the taxes towards the school system. There are parents who do jobs. I'm a single parent through the week, and I've mentioned this in my email. I had to take my son off from his activity to be here. So we, as parents, are trying to do our best to help our children. All I'm requesting is for our school system to look at the children in a holistic manner, not from an AP point of view. So let's work together and see how we can make this happen for our children. Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public comment?
Apologies for not giving my name earlier. Rippy Carta, 58 Independence, and actually 42 Vanderveer as well. So I want to start with my favorite topic, which is expanding the Gifted and Talented program for elementary school children. I would like also to work with the curriculum committee alongside with some of the other parents I've spoken with in the Gifted and Talented program, and we have ideas of how to expand it, whether it's to include reading, writing, comprehension, language arts, maybe some communication skills, whatnot, but I think that that would definitely benefit those students that are achieving at a higher level or can handle slightly more challenging work other than just the math program right now, which is administered absolutely wonderfully. Lots of kudos to Ms. Lenstra for doing a great job at Mount Prospect. And I want to thank the curriculum committee here at the last meeting when you mentioned that you're going to look into having this whole 6th grade accelerated math program. I am very excited to hear about that and looking forward to getting more details and more information regarding that. My last comment tonight, you've heard a lot about another cultural group asking for an additional holiday. I am asking the entire board here, again, to take a look at the student body and take a look at which holidays are offered at the moment and which ones you're considering for the next 3 years and how that adequately represents, in a fair and equitable manner, the student body that is now in session as well as contemplated within the next 3 years. When you're looking at that, look at all the students that take certain days off, whether they are legitimate school holidays or not. And you will see that in the past few years, there's been a big chunk of students who have chosen to stay home and celebrate their special religious and cultural holiday. There are also several students in that same cultural group that chose not to stay home because they did not feel that they could either make up the work or it was quote unquote worth it to do so. To ask a 3rd grader, an 8th grader, an 11th grader, senior, to balance a religious holiday against educational priorities, I think is an unfair ask. If not all the students are being asked to do the same. So I'm asking you, in your deliberation of whether or not you're going to add an additional holiday, take a look at the student body and take a look and see if the students are adequately represented by the holiday schedule. And for next year, my 4th point for tonight, is there's got to be a better way to handle the snow days. I know we've beat this over with it like a dead horse, and you've done the best you can do, and I accept what the ultimate decision was to take away the 4 days of the spring break, because those are the rules, right? We're following the rules. But I think the rules need to be looked at very carefully next year, because at the moment, I have a 3rd grader and an 8th grader, and the 8th grader is highly concerned about having to miss some of those days during that week. And we've made arrangements to deal with that. And I think other families in town have done similar things for vacation plans that could not be canceled. But I feel for the teachers. I feel that they, having to substantiate their plans, having to figure out how they're going to get that time for rest and relaxation that they desperately also need probably by this time of the year, I feel for them. So I really implore you to take a look at the way that we're going to structure this for the future. This was an off year, it was a weird year. Who knows what next year is going to bring, but I just really would like you all to... Thank you. So I would really like you to take a quick look and really think it through about what makes the most sense. Which holidays should come off? Should it really start with spring break? Could it be Good Friday? Could it be some other day during the February break, whatever it is? But take a look at that for the sake of the teachers, the students, and the parents. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, board. Thank you so much for giving us your time today and listening to all our speeches last week, this week about Diwali.
Could you tell us your name and address, please?
Oh,
Thanks.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
My name is Reena Singhvi, 8 Independence Drive. So I just want to ask the board a question as to what are the next steps, because you've heard a lot of speeches about Diwali, impassioned speeches from our children, from the adults, from members of the community. So what are the next steps? When do we hear back from the board? Is the calendar committee going to meet soon? We just feel like we really don't know what's happening because we don't have a response. So I would really appreciate if we can get a response from you guys today as to what the next steps are. Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public comment? No? Okay, so I will close public comment. Before, Mr. Markarian was going to respond to a couple of the questions. Before that, I just wanted to thank the students that came out tonight. We always love having students come speak at our meetings, especially when they're so articulate and passionate as you guys were tonight. So I wanted to thank you for coming, and we hope that you guys will come back to more meetings sometime because we love having students. So Mr. Markarian is going to respond to some of the questions.
Okay, so with regard to calendar discussions and next steps, the policy committee, as Ms. Korn mentioned, did meet this morning and will be reporting out on their discussion about calendar and future calendar development at the next Board of Ed meeting, where we can talk about the steps that were discussed at that meeting. but we won't be able to report out on that until minutes have been prepared for the board members. So that will wait a couple weeks, and we can certainly have some discussion on that at that time. I think it would be appropriate. With regard to AP, GPA, honors, juniors, seniors, AP, Ivy colleges, discussions in committee, I can tell you that this is a regular topic that comes up in curriculum committee, and I think we probably would have all felt amazed and wondered if we were able to come up with the formula that led to uniform content on GPA and maximizing opportunity for holistic experiences and simultaneously getting kids into Stanford. I wish we had a magic bullet for that. I know that the committee has expressed interest in talking about issues like that and has spent some time on it, and I wouldn't be surprised if we spend more time on it in the future. But I don't know that we're going to create the kind of solution that satisfies everyone in that area. That's about it.
Okay, at this point, we're up to board forum. Do any board members have any topics they would like to raise? Mrs. Swerner?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Mrs. McEwen said. The students who spoke were so thoughtful and compelling, and it's always appreciated when you come out and address us. But in addition to your request for the additional holiday, something else was really struck me that were in several of the comments that several of you made, talking about being too scared and stressed to miss a single day of school. And I'm not just talking about in the context of a religious holiday. I have a current Ridge student and one who just graduated, and I know they feel the same way. I'm sick, but I can't afford to miss a single day of school. I know someone also came up and spoke to us about approaching the students in a more holistic manner, in a healthier manner. We formed an ad hoc committee to address the social and emotional needs of our students this past year. And I'd like to add this point for future discussion at a meeting. Students shouldn't be scared to miss a single day of school. There should be measures in place. Life happens. There are family events. There are religious holidays. There are illnesses. And we have to have a process in place that when a student misses a day of school, they aren't frightened. And I think we need to address that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Again, I see it in my own home, but obviously it's an issue with many of our students, particularly at Ridge.
Anyone else have anything for board forum? Okay, Mr. Markarian?
So the board has been having discussion to accomplish a mini strategic planning set of meetings working with the representative from New Jersey school boards. And I just wanted to share out the dates that were proposed. If you remember, the idea was to have 3 meetings next fall, the fall of the 18-19 school year, and the dates that our facilitator was available to hold those meetings were October 1st, October 15th, November 5th, and November 19th. So obviously that's 4 dates. We only need 3. I worked with her to come up with these dates as Mondays that were not already scheduled as board meetings, thinking that there might be a fairly reasonable opportunity that you'd be available on Mondays. So I would suggest October 1st, October 15th, and then choose the wild card pick. You know, I feel like it's a scratch-off lottery ticket, but pick the 11th, the November 5th or the 19th.
5th is Teachers Convention Week, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yes.
So maybe the 19th is your preference?
Is
Just
the 19th
saying.
the Monday of Thanksgiving?
The 19th is
make a
the
difference to
Monday
me,
of
but-
the Thanksgiving week, yeah.
Oh, the
Yeah.
19th
Yeah.
is Thanksgiving?
The 5th. The 5th is the Monday of the Teachers Convention week, but it's a Monday, and the convention's not till Thursday, Friday. So I'm getting a sense for November 5th. Is the preference?
Yeah.
Would these be evening meetings?
Yes, they'd be like board meetings,
7 o'clock.
public meetings, 7 o'clock. The 5th? Is there a general sentiment to go for the 5th? Okay, I'll get back to school boards and try to firm that up.
Just for the public's benefit, this is a strategic plan for our district, and it is something that we want public input and staff input and teachers, everyone that works in our district. So this is something that everyone's going to participate in. So we encourage you, those of you who have some of the concerns you raised tonight, this would be the time to come and express them. It's going to be led by someone from New Jersey School Boards, and they have like a whole process that districts can go through to kind of determine their kind of vision and their plan for where they think their district should go. So this is something that we are going to be sending information out to the public, and we want everyone to participate. So more to come about that. So, is there anyone else for board forum? Okay,
I
we're
just
up.
had a question about
Yeah,
the-
sure.
Is it in like, they do like smaller groups, so it's not like a...
Right, but the way I
It'd be like
understand
in
it
the
is they
gym
will
or
break,
something?
there'll be different groups that break out and work
Oh, it
on
would be
different
like here,
issues.
like us,
Right,
and
it wouldn't
then-
just be like people sitting up here and, no. It's going to be interactive and people
Yeah, that's
participate.
right.
I don't know
So
exactly how it works.
It's not like we're preaching, it's like everyone's talking to
Right,
each other. And
yeah.
working sessions.
Working sessions.
Yeah,
I don't
just
know
so
exactly
people
how
get
it's
an idea of
structured.
how, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, and we'll be sending out information about that. Okay, does someone want to make a motion for adjournment? Mrs. Swerner and Mrs. Wooldridge, thank you. All in favor?